Relations? If not, I'll look for a motion in a second.
This is Jeff. I'll move to approve the minutes. Jeff Kraft.
Thank you, Jeff. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brian. Those all in favor, just say aye.
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 Those opposed? All right, those minutes stand approved. Next up, Sarah, do you want to go ahead and give a broadband office update?
Yes, absolutely. First update is from me, and then the second update is from Megan. So first update is, according to our executive order that created this board, we have an annual report that is due to the governor and legislators and the public at some point. And we've chosen to provide that report by the end of this fiscal year, which is the end of June. Next meeting, the May meeting, will be all about reviewing the annual report. So you will have a opportunity board to provide comment and feedback on the outline and the topics within the annual report. And then the public will also have an opportunity to provide their feedback. We really encourage anyone and everyone to participate and provide feedback. This is really an opportunity for a collaborative approach to the feedback about this board that we're offering to the governor and our legislators and to the public. That's it for me.
Thank you. Who else is going to give an update? I didn't catch up. Megan.
Yeah. So my update is also about a responsibility listed in the executive order, which has to do with consolidating or centralizing all broadband information into a single website. So the Colorado Broadband Office is working on updating our website, and we will be working with DOLA and DORA to get all that information centralized. Our planned launch date is June 15th, and we'll just keep you updated on how that progress is going.
All right, thank you, Megan. Any questions from the board members on that update? Okay. Now we set aside 20 minutes of the board meeting for any public comment for those items not on today's agenda, I believe, right, Sarah? I think that's how we have that. So are there anybody from the public that would like to do any public comment for the board? If so, please just unmute or raise your hand. Not seeing any? Okay, there will be some updates a little later in the meeting, and I will look for some public comment. We don't typically do those on all of our presentations, but some of these are pretty important. So we're going to go ahead and allow some public questions after some of the presentations. So that's more around the National Broadband Availability Map, and I believe the next one after that. So next up, we'll move into the updates on the Colorado legislation. So Kate Sneed, I know she's on, I saw her.
Sorry, you passed over Catherine Keegan. There's
Oh, sorry, boy, man, Keegan, you did a great job, Catherine. Sorry, I was, I feel so sorry. I apologize, Catherine.
No worries at all.
So update from Catherine. So go ahead, Catherine.
Awesome, thank you. And I did put some slides together. Sarah, if you can give me access to screen share. Or.
And do you mind, Catherine, to give your AF or OFOW, what the acronym stands for our audience?
Yes, absolutely. So that stands for the Office of the Future of Work at the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. All right, thank you. Should be able to... All right, everyone can see that okay? Okay, so I just wanted to follow up from my December presentation to you all with a few updates on some of the activities that we've been undergoing related to digital literacy and inclusion, and then to share the plan for the Digital Literacy and Inclusion Subcommittee of the Broadband Advisory Board and get any feedback there. So I'll just jump right in. As a reminder, I'm Catherine Keegan. I'm the director of the office. And just for some context, If you're not familiar with the Office of the Future of Work, it was established through an executive order in September 2019 from Governor Polis. And I'm housed within the Department of Labor and Employment, but I'm tasked with working across state agencies and communities to raise awareness and identify policy and program solutions that will create a skilled and resilient workforce. So looking to identify key priorities related to the future of work. And over the last year, digital literacy and inclusion has really risen to the top as one of the cross-cutting issues that will sort of make or break the future of Colorado's workforce and economy. And so with that, we've been really working towards this end goal of digital equity, where every individual has access to affordable high-speed internet, access to web-enabled affordable technology, and focused on how do we make sure there's access to ongoing skill development to make sure people can leverage and work alongside technology. And so with the partnership with the Broadband Office, I'm really focused on complementing the efforts to build broadband infrastructure across the state and make sure that we have the systems in place so that people can make the most of that infrastructure as it becomes more and more available to them. I also realized my coffee's hit and I'm talking very fast. I'm happy to slow down if you need, and feel free to interrupt me as well if there's any questions or clarifications. So I talked with you all in December of 2020, and so I just wanted to share a few brief updates of the activities we've undertaken since then. And I believe those slides are also available in the notes, so if you want to go back, those are available for you as well. But some of the key priorities that we've focused on is one, developing a partnership with Mile High United Way in their 211 system across the state to audit and update all of their digital literacy and inclusion resources. So we're in the process of getting all of that information from them, and then we'll be using the digital inclusion subcommittee and other outreach mechanisms to really make sure 211 can remain the comprehensive go-to resource for anyone looking to find support services or get connected to resources related to digital literacy and inclusion. As part of that, we'll also be training all of their navigators and resource specialists so that they can identify common signals that individuals maybe have a barrier related to digital literacy and inclusion, and so that they can embed some of these recommendations and other resources as part of helping that participant or that customer reach their end goal. So that is on track to be done by June 30th of this year. Since March through the first week in April, I worked with the Colorado Workforce Development Council to deliver a design thinking technical assistance training module to 7 organizations from across the state who were focused on building interventions to bridge the digital divide. So we took these 7 organizations through a training experience where they were learning the design thinking process, as well as equipping them with information and data about the digital divide. And they used that process to hone in on specific interventions that they wanted to build for their organization. We plan to follow up with each of those organizations as they work to implement their solution, and also take the lessons learned from what were the roadblocks that they didn't expect when they were trying to add in digital literacy and inclusion to their normal way of work. And the 7 organizations included the Division of Vocational Rehab, who really focused on the accessibility of their website and found that it's not the most digitally accessible website, despite being part of our Division of Vocational Rehab and specifically targeting working with people with disabilities. And so they're working to update that. We worked with a nonprofit, the Center for Work, Education and Employment, as well as another nonprofit, Teach by Tech, who are looking to connect people to digital skill development as part of workforce readiness. We had a few different workforce centers and adult education providers that had started digital literacy programs and were adding in digital navigation and other curriculum, and we're learning from others. So a lot of lessons learned from the 6-week program with these 7 organizations. And there'll be more to come on those lessons learned in ways that we want to promote that with other organizations who are interested in adding this onto their service delivery. Next is a partnership we started with Fort Lewis College as part of a grant that I've worked on with the Department of Higher Ed. And so what they are working on at Fort Lewis is, as part of their first year sort of welcome center and their career services center, they're embedding digital skill development to create future ready workers as part of their system. So they're creating a 1 credit course that will be available to all incoming students, as well as career and digital navigations to support incoming students who may lack some of the resources or the technology they need. And then they're also creating, they're adding to the peer support navigators that they have. They're training them all on digital literacy and inclusion so that they can provide that additional resource and also become a resource in their communities as they return home. That work is just getting started and is expected to be done by October of this year. And then a little bit less related to digital literacy and inclusion specifically, but related to thinking about the future of work and how technology can create opportunities that weren't available before. I did want to mention that we launched in partnership with OEDIT and the Workforce Development Council, as well as the Economic Development Council of Colorado. We launched a remote work initiative to try to promote location neutral employment. And this included certificates of completion with CSU Global to try to help people build or refine the skills they've learned in working remotely and take advantage of the remote opportunities that are available to them in Colorado and across the world. So those are the main projects that we've been up to since December 2020. Still to come is, launching within CDLE's website and the Future of Work website, digital literacy and inclusion resource page. We will have the first meeting of the Digital Literacy and Inclusion Committee next week, and I'll talk more about that in a second. And then as we're looking to the end of this fiscal year, building out my the digital literacy and inclusion report that will really focus on the skill mismatch and needs related to digital skill development and access to technology. Since December, we also worked to refine our goals for 2022 and the WIGs, the wildly important goals that we have for CDLE related to digital inclusion. So in addition to making sure everyone has access to training and technology to build their digital skills, a new addition that will be part of the annual report that Sarah mentioned and will lay the foundation for a deeper dive is really thinking about the talent development needs to build broadband infrastructure. So as more funding is coming to local communities, local internet service providers and co-ops, we want to make sure that we're connecting unemployed Coloradans, just transition Coloradans who are experiencing the closure of coal-based power plants and coal mines in their communities, as well as other professionals who are looking for a career change. We want to make sure we have the training and apprenticeship opportunities in place to meet the demand that these providers will need in order to meet the goals for broadband infrastructure development. So we're just beginning those conversations and I've been working closely with the Broadband office on that. Related to that and related to the Digital Inclusion Committee, we are going to be setting some baselines, working to identify the data that we can use to set baselines around digital inclusion and digital skill development so that we can start to chip away at these challenges and set metrics for ourselves over the next few years until we solve it, but making sure that we're really data informed. And that'll be one of the big pieces of the working groups for the Digital Inclusion Committee. Beyond that, we are looking at all of the stimulus proposals coming down from the state and federal administration. There's a lot of work being done around workforce development. And what we're trying to do is embed digital skill development, digital inclusion best practices into a lot of the stimulus proposals that CDLE is part of. Additionally, we're just paying attention to all of the information coming from other states and figuring out how we can take those best practices and adopt them here as part of our recovery or beyond. And so just to finish up here, I wanted to give a little bit more detail about the Digital Literacy and Inclusion Subcommittee. We sent out the initial invites a couple of weeks ago, and it was in the Colorado Broadband Office newsletter, but I also have a link to it in here and can drop it in the chat once I'm done speaking. Our goal is to have a pretty broad invite list to the first meeting in particular, but it'll be open to everyone ongoing, because we want to develop really robust working groups related to digital literacy and inclusion efforts that will allow us to come up with recommendations, metrics, and best practices that we can present to the Broadband Advisory Board to inform the efforts and investments that we're making across the state. So really our goal is to raise awareness of these digital literacy and inclusion issues, complement the efforts going on in the broadband office, build policy recommendations, identify those data milestones, and ultimately try to lift up promising practices that are already taking place across Colorado, because there are many, and fill in gaps with the group. So if you are interested in joining, we would love to have all of the attendees here today and the Broadband Advisory Board members. And I'll be sure to provide regular updates to this group as the work continues. But we'll be kicking that off next Tuesday from 11 to 12:30, making sure that we're clarifying the difference between the Broadband Advisory Board and the scope of the infrastructure development that this board is working on, compared to the digital literacy and inclusion efforts that we want to be the focus of the Digital Literacy and Inclusion Committee. We'll share some of the efforts across the state and the promising practices we've seen. And then we're going to sort of set up the structure of the working groups that we'll have as part of the subcommittee, which will be focused on policy, data, and best practices related to digital skill attainment and technology. And so we'd also like to leave the attendees with calls to action for this work. The immediate call to action will be to share out information about the emergency broadband benefit, as well as to help us update those 211 resources. But of course, I'm open to other calls to action or things that we should add on, and hope that as the inclusion committee gets off the ground, I'll be able to present some of the feedback and ideas to this group and use that to continue to iterate and give calls to action and ideas to the committee itself. But I will stop there. And that's my email address. And like I said, I'll drop that registration in the chat, but also happy to take any questions from the group.
Thank you, Catherine. I have a whole bunch, but what I'm going to do is let the board ask some questions first. If there's any board members that would like to chime in and ask any questions or make any comments. They want me to ask all the questions, Catherine. So I have quite a few. So because this is good work, I mean, this is extremely important. And it sounds like you're still kind of like building the plane and flying it at the same time. So you probably don't have answers to a lot, but how prevalent is this issue? Are you discovering throughout the state? Like, do we really, I mean, are we seeing, if we're in a rural part of the state, are we seeing 90% of digital literacy issues and inclusion issues? I'd be curious, and I think a lot of folks would be curious, how prevalent is it when you get into the rural areas? It sounds like from what you said, you're still trying to gather those statistics and that data, so you may not have it. So I think it's really important. I don't know if you want to comment on that before I go to the next one.
Yeah. So I do think that, local data is a challenge, and that's part of what I want us to help figure out how we can measure that or figure out a good proxy to measure that. We do have national data and around digital literacy and inclusion, and a lot of it from the National Skills Coalition, who looked at the workforce and found across industries, across age groups, that there's significant numbers of people who have limited or no digital skills. But I do think it's incredibly important to figure out specific data for local regions in Colorado, so that we can start to see how we're doing as we try to promote these interventions. So happy to share some of that data if it's helpful. to the group and to include in the minutes or follow up, because I do think it's interesting to look at it on a broad scale as well.
Yeah, and you're right. The national statistics may not be very relevant to us, and Colorado is pretty interesting because the metropolitan areas are very high tech, and so it'd be interesting to see how many remote workers who have left the metropolitan areas and pushed out into the rural parts because of the remoteness of, or the we'll say flexible workplaces, right? Where folks don't want to be part of metropolitan, now have pushed out into the rural parts of the state. And then how do we bring along those that may not have the digital competency that would help them become a remote worker? So that's interesting. I'll skip over these, kind of answer all those. So interesting in the Fort Lewis discussion. That's kind of new. So are you getting any statistics of like how many people are actually required to take that course at 1 credit hour? And I'm assuming you can get some sort of idea that's coming into Fort Lewis College of the level of competency that's coming in, and how do we make sure that we don't leave folks behind when broadband starts coming into these rural communities? Is that a good like litmus test of the issue, is seeing what comes in through there?
Yeah, exactly. We're excited, the CDHE and I were excited about working with Fort Lewis College for a wide variety of reasons. One is that in talking with their, I forget her title, if it's Chancellor or Dean, but talking with them there, they were sharing that many, they have a huge number of first generation students, they have a huge Native American population, and that many of them become ambassadors for their communities that they return to between semesters. And so that was what first piqued their interest in partnering with us to think about, well, how do we, we have all these students that are working as, peer support navigators. What if we also help them with these digital inclusion issues? And we also, we know that some of our students struggle with access to technology as they're getting enrolled. We assume they all know how to use a learning management system, and we probably shouldn't make that assumption. So I think they're interested in figuring out what the gap is and using that, I think, to inform their larger career services and sort of preparation for graduation for all their students.
Yeah, that's great. Hopefully more colleges join in and kind of help out. So, one thing I was thinking where Dora and OEdit would have a lot of play is, what is the relationship with both industry and employers, whereas broadband is being expanded into a community that may not have had it at either a quality level or at all. And is there any effort within the industry to promote digital, literacy and inclusion through your efforts, and kind of join forces? So when they come and offer internet to somebody, they have some resource guides that might help them understand it a little bit more. That's one perspective of it. And then with OEdit, is there an opportunity where we can help employers kind of think more broadly about their employee base, so that it is inclusive to include remote workers a little bit more, and kind of change the mindset of we got to have a manufacturing plant here to be an economic driver. That's no longer like that anymore. There is a lot of remote opportunity for employment, and so it's kind of two-pronged. One is getting employers to promote digital inclusion, as well as when broadband providers or ISPs show up into a community, what are they doing to try to close that digital divide as well? So
yeah, and Jeff may have something to add too related to the remote work. So I think OEdit has really been taking a lead to promote location neutral employment, and there have been great partners with us to think about how we support employers in adopting remote work as a strategy. So I don't know if you wanted to jump in.
No, I'm happy to jump in and give a little bit of an update. And Bob, it's a good question. It's a really good question. And, frankly, even before the COVID pandemic, OEdit was thinking really hard about remote workers. And, there's a lot of potentially strategic geographic rationale within the state of Colorado for not necessarily having all of our population growth occur sort of in the core parts of the Front Range. And so we identified that even before COVID, and obviously there's cultural shifts due to COVID and a more openness to remote working and things like that. So a couple of things I'll just mention that we've done. One of them is this program called the Loan Program, stands for location neutral employment. And the sort of the philosophy behind that program is OEDIT offers a lot of incentives in competitive multi-state site selection decisions where employers are thinking, well, maybe I'll go to Utah, maybe I'll go to Colorado. A lot of them are tech companies that are sort of leaving the Bay Area, at least for their second headquarters. And so Colorado's been really attractive. They've been coming into Denver and the Denver metro area. Our location neutral program says, we'll actually give you an extra incentive if you sign up to having your at least a portion of your employees located in remote rural Colorado and economically distressed areas. So we won't give you the incentive to necessarily locate them in Pitkin County, but we will in Montrose County, or somewhere on the Eastern Plains.
Mhm.
And we've had 4 or 5 employers take us up on that and start hiring people in County and Logan County have specifically attracted some of these employers. So we do think that sort of incentivizing and kind of spreading some of the net new jobs to the extent that companies are willing to do it around Colorado and rural Colorado is a really viable opportunity, and sort of culturally adding to that. So we are trying to incentivize that. And the other thing that we've done some thinking on is our business services or business support team led by Glenn Plagens is building an online learning platform that can support the small business development centers and just businesses and people around the state so that we can deploy remote learning. And as part of that process, we're looking into deploying a remote working sort of certification for both employers and employees, where you could self-certify and say, well, this is how I learned what it takes to be a good remote employee and what's necessary to kind of provide that sort of base level sort of training and things like that directly to employees and employers. So we definitely see this as an emerging issue. We want Colorado to be maximally competitive, and for businesses that like this kind of arrangement, we want to support it, and we think it's good for the state. So sorry if that was long-winded, but that's kind of where we've been so far and what we've thought about this so far.
No, it's great information, and maybe I get excited over these kind of things because I do believe in digital inclusion and bringing folks together. And I always believe that employment opportunities don't have to be centralized. And if we can provide economic engines and employment opportunities and growth, and just there's so many layers and levels of opportunity with this conversation that it gets me excited. So sorry I hogged up the 10 minutes of questions, but again, this is an important subject for our state and for our communities.
Hey, Bob, just one comment from Antonio. Hey, Catherine, I think one of the synergies I'd like to see come out of this relationship is to know what the Office of Future Work thinks the speeds should be. Because I'm getting a lot of feedback from industry saying they have a certain speed they want their employees to be able to have before they'll go work in rural Colorado. So I think we should make that a focus and let Colorado be known for that, that we are working on increasing our speeds.
That's a great point.
Yeah, Antonio, that's interesting. So I come from industry before I worked for the state, and I worked for a Philadelphia company, and it was disaster recovery IT work, and you were allowed to live anywhere you can get broadband, and broadband was anything over 200 megs, and you were allowed to work anywhere. And so it was very interesting to have executives and folks that make $250,000 living in Leadville, Colorado as an economic engine because they could get a hold of 200 megs or more. So that is a very valid question, and I think we should take some seriousness around that, because I believe, if I recall, there was also a discussion around another employer in a remote area that needed big bandwidth. I think, Jeff, you might have been involved with, I can't remember where it was, but it was a tech or a DoD company that needed to have a lot of broadband to support its operations. So I think that's a great question, and we should really consider that. All right, so I probably exceeded the 2 minutes. One last thing, Catherine, if you could provide the website. I think you said you launched it. I didn't see the website actually listed. So if you don't mind putting that in chat, so folks know your website location for more information.
Yep, we will be launching the digital inclusion website by the end of this month, but
Okay.
I can also put a link in the chat just to the Office of the Future of Work. And then I think, Sarah, I shared out the information on the subcommittee as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much. So we appreciate having you today. All right, now we can move on to Kate's Need. So thank you, Catherine, and I apologize for skipping over you. So moving right on to Kate's Need, an update on the Colorado legislation. It's all you, Kate.
Thank you, Bob. let's see where to start. House Bill 1109 is passed the House and is sitting in the Senate, has been for a couple weeks now. I don't really have an update on that. I think the major update is that Representative Kennedy in the House and Senator Bridges in the Senate are going to be running the state stimulus bill on providing state federal, or it's not federal dollars, state dollars for stimulus around broadband. And they released a draft copy of that last week. We used the broadband stakeholder biweekly meeting last week to allow Representative Kennedy to receive feedback and comments on that. He has made some edits, and my understanding is that the bill has been sent into file, meaning it should be introduced in the House in the next couple of days. So I will keep everyone apprised, mainly through that my list that I send out to, but Sarah can also send it out to the board with the House bill and what the number is on that. But that as of last week, it's sending money to DORA, the Broadband Deployment Board, for continued infrastructure, last mile investment, sending then some money to DOLA for middle mile investment, and then sending some money to OIT through a new program to do non-infrastructure related work, so specific to telehealth devices, and then also because currently there's no other way to fund the tribes, and the governor would like to be able to give some funding to the 2 tribal nations in Colorado through OIT as well. But the 20 million will go directly to the tribes, and then the rest will go for grants to telehealth organizations for grants to help with devices and modem router upgrades and things like that within facilities in rural Colorado for health. So that is, and then Senate Bill 60 went through committee in the Senate and is sitting in the Senate Appropriations Committee. That was primarily amended significantly to, at this point, creates a stipend program to help for low income payment towards monthly bills through the high cost support mechanism. So everything's kind of still out there waiting to be continue going through the process. But the biggest thing is that this state stimulus bill will probably be introduced in the House this week and start its process. So that's my updates.
Thank you, Kate. Anyone have any questions for Kate from the board? Nope. All right. Thank you, Kate. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And next up we have
Teresa.
Teresa. I think you have some updates from the federal level. Did I guess it right?
Absolutely. We have a number of programs that are currently updating along the lines of our availability for funding windows being open. The COVID-19 telehealth program window will open at the end of this month, closing on May the 6th. That is a $250 million program that healthcare providers and clinics can apply for to directly support connectivity from clinicians and doctors to their patients directly. The state of Colorado actually did fairly well in the first round of that program that was funded under the CARES Act in March of last year. And so we had about 13 applications, 12 or 13 applications that were funded and reaching over 3.5 million. So the CBO has been working directly with Carrie's office of eHealth Innovation and getting the word out on that program, hoping that we will see a much broader application cycle for Colorado this round. The other particular program I would bring to your attention that has received, as Bob put it earlier, we're flying the plane while we're building it, right? And so is the FCC's Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. That program, we still don't have an official opening date for enrollments for eligible households for that program, but it's looking like it's coming sooner rather than later. And it will be at the end of this month, the FCC will be releasing a number of documents and tools that they've prepared to do outreach with consumer groups, groups that support eligible households and low-income households. And so we're getting close. We'll make sure we keep getting information out through the Broadband Advisory Board, through the Office of eHealth Innovation, and through our other agency partners to encourage participation in that Emergency Broadband Benefit Program that provides that $50 credit to eligible households, or $75 credit to eligible households residing on tribal lands. So those two programs that we've had some developments in, Bob. The third, I would say, is last week, the USDA announced that it looks like they will have close to $1 billion that they will make available in their round 3 cycle of their Reconnect program. That program provides grants, loans, and combination grant loans to communities, local government entities, to nonprofits, for-profit providers that want to deploy broadband to the home. And so that program, we had expected, because the Supplemental Appropriations Act that passed at the end of December appropriated only $635 million. We thought that was going to be our upper limit for that program, but the Secretary Ken Kuchno actually announced last week that that dollar amount was going to be much higher. It was going to be $1 billion. I think I might have given him a raise there. That may not, he may not be he's the head of the USDA's Rural Development Program. So I apologize. He is not the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So I'll have to send him a note though, telling him I gave him a promotion. That program is going to be available for the application window, we suspect, in late August or September timeframe. So keep a lookout on that. Colorado's done fairly well in that program. We've received 3 awards in the last 18 months of that program that will connect over 1,200 very remote homes with gigabit fiber to the home to over 1,200 rural Colorado households. So those 3 programs, there's been some developments since the last time we talked. And if you have any questions, please check out the CBO website, especially our federal corner. Megan Gernert and I work very hard to keep that up to date. And we invite you to send us any questions you might have related to those programs and the links. And I think that's it, Bob. I'll turn it back over to you unless there's questions. Obviously, I'd love to answer questions.
Yeah, any questions from the board first? We do have some from the public. Okay, not seeing any. There are 2 questions in the chat, Teresa. When will we know what ISPs in Colorado are participating in the EBB, or will we know?
We do, and I'm gonna tap dance a little bit, Bob. I need to get to my slide deck, and I will actually put that list in the chat. Okay. The FCC is monitoring that. Obviously, they're the gatekeeper. You know, the FCC actually gets to allow those providers to participate or not. And we have a link on our website, as well as, there we go. That's the link. But we've linked it directly to the FCC's website that will remain evergreen. So you can go to the CBO's website and get this link. These are the providers in Colorado right now that have signed up to be an EBB provider of at least the eligible discount. Now, the second piece of that program, as many of you know, includes a device discount as well. And it was the FCC's hope that and Kathleen Catherine Keegan's hope as well, I know, right, Catherine, and the work you're doing, that all of these service providers would also provide this device discount as well. So you had the two things meeting, right? Access and a device to get on the internet. Unfortunately, when you go through this link that I just put in the chat, you will see that it's probably less than a quarter of the providers. Well, we might be up to half now, maybe 45% of those providers are actually providing that link to the device discount as well. So we know a lot of providers, smaller ones specifically, are really struggling with that component of this program because they may or may not have an existing relationship with a device manufacturer or a device refurbisher to be able to provide these you know, devices that are cost effective. So I think that gets to the question, right, Bob? Anything else?
I don't think you posted it on the chat within the meeting invite or the meeting. Could you resend that?
Me, I'll take.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
So
Sarah has to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. So
All
sorry,
right.
I sent it to her. Yeah.
Okay, the host. Okay, that's fine. She'll repost it out. And the second question is, how long do you expect the EBB funding to last?
Well, you know, if I could predict that, I'd actually be in Vegas putting down some money on the red or black. What we're hearing from the people in DC that are closest to this program, the estimates are it could last up to 6 months, maybe a little more, depending upon how aggressively service providers participate and how many customers and eligible households actually sign up. So our best estimate right now is about 6 months.
Okay. Mark, you guessed right. So any other questions from the board before we conclude Teresa's portion? All right, seeing none, thank you, everybody. We're going to move right along. Thank you, Teresa. We're going to move into the National Broadband Availability Map. Tim Moyer, the Director of National Broadband Availability Map Program, I think is going to be presenting. So Tim, it's all you.
Excellent. I just took myself off mute. I'll need somebody to give me permissions to share my screen.
You should have permission now, Tim, to be able to.
There we go. Do you all see my screen?
Yes.
And apologies, I'm not on video. The last time I did one of these, it failed miserably with connection issues. So I just used the dial-in this time. So you don't get the benefit of that. Teresa's seen my lovely face, but you all don't get the benefit of that. All right, so before I jump into the slides here, I'm going to highlight a couple of things. There's some legislative stuff that's happened recently also that is informative. So the NTIA and FCC, we've been in discussions, basically working through our individual swim lanes in this space. There's a lot of, as many may realize, a lot of overlap in what NTIA does and FCC does in a lot of things, spectrum and mapping and things like that. So the FCC had a responsibility to draft a letter to Congress outlining the roles and responsibilities related to NBAM and the Broadband Data Act. And so they coordinated with us and we contributed there. The Consolidated Appropriations Act of 21 also requires NTIA, FCC, and USDA to enter into an interagency agreement requiring coordination on the distribution of funds. So that's a positive, and so those discussions are underway right now. Also, access broadband legislation requires coordination of support to ensure funds are being distributed in an efficient, tech-neutral, and financially sustainable manner and don't duplicate other federal programs. So FCC, USDA are part of that. Also ARC, EDA, HUD, IMLS, and DOL, and basically any other program that has a similar agency that has a similar program. So it kind of that catch-all. So those discussions are underway. And then here's the big whopper under access broadband legislation. NTIA has now been tasked with tracking all federal broadband investment on the construction, use of, and access to broadband infrastructure using federal support in a central database. So guess what else I'm doing in addition to NBAM is standing up a database, and we just hired some new people to help us with that. So we got to provide an annual report to Congress that captures the number of residents that receive broadband because of federal investment, which program, and here's another big whopper, an estimate of the economic impact. So we'll be hiring some economists too. And so that's really encouraging to see all that coordination, and ties into what we do at NTIA a lot. We bring stakeholders together. So jumping into the slides here, let's go to first slide. Okay, so the National Broadband Availability Map, the NBAM. And so for us, it's more than a map. It's a GIS platform. It's for data collection, visualization, and analysis of federal and non-federal data sets. We actually bring in data from the feds, states, and commercial vendors to help identify regions with insufficient service. And so the users in the tool, our state and federal partners, they're going to compare multiple data sets to identify discrepancies in broadband availability. You may have heard terms like served versus underserved or unserved. Those are the things that we're trying to help figure out. And then we're building out capabilities to produce reports and analysis. I call that our business intelligence strategy. So if you've heard of programs like Power BI or Tableau and capabilities like that, we're looking to embed that into the NBAM platform to help us go from a visualization platform to a visualization, analytics, and output platform. So as we were standing up the NBAM, we did a request for comment, sought input from industry, academia, everybody about broadband availability. And some themes really rose to the top. Number one was acquiring broadband data that is more granular than the census block level, hugely important. And two, consider crowdsourced data. So thinking about speed test data or quality, location data. Three, evaluating multiple data sources. The idea that the FCC 477 deployment data collected directly from ISPs that is not validated and is at that census block level with all those known challenges is not sufficient to make these decisions. And so bringing in multiple layers to help inform that conversation was important. And then acquiring multiple pieces of information about the connection at that granular level. So knowing who the service provider is, the connection type, the connection speeds, both down and up. I think this pandemic has really shown a light on the importance of upload speed. It's, we prior to this, everybody thought about like, okay, I got my Netflix, great, but you can't telework. You can't do teleeducation. You can't do telehealth. You can't do anything without upload. And so that has really been highlighted by this pandemic. And so we built that into our program also. So going back in the Wayback Machine here, back in 2018, actually in the way back machine, NTIA actually built the first nationwide broadband map. We actually had a $300 million grant program. We stood up broadband offices across the country and did data collection, data validation, which was hugely important, and put that in a map. Unfortunately, that program ended in 2014 when the funding ended, and we transitioned that to the FCC. The FCC didn't continue that old model. They started their new model with the 477 data at the census block level. And then you scan forward to 2018, and Congress came back to NTIA and said, hey, we want you to get back in the mapping game. And so what started off with that $300 million grant program to stand up broadband offices nationwide, Congress said, here's $7.5 million. And we said, that buys you a pilot. And so we started off with 8 states, leveraging that state broadband leaders network, which is basically an offshoot of that original mapping program. That's been a hugely important resource for us, that kind of informal body that comes together monthly of broadband champions across the country. So leveraging that body, we highlighted the 8 states that were probably in the best position to start off. They had data. They maybe had maps themselves. They had programs, and we kicked off from there. The whole goal here is to basically highlight broadband availability challenges. And so we're to partner with states, we're to partner with feds. We can buy commercial data. So I can't go out and fund the collection of new data sets, but I can take existing data sets from states and federal partners, and I can go out and buy data. And we'll get into that in a little bit, which is really interesting. So I said it's not a mandate to collect new data. And so when we look at the goal here of identifying gaps in broadband availability to support what we call cooperative policymaking and better informed decisions, it's really important to note that there's no single national source that's going to tell policymakers where to make investments. And it goes back to that point of multi-layering. Understanding the different data sources, layering them in a meaningful way. So that can illustrate both what we know and what we don't know, which is important. And bringing those data together from different perspectives. So that ISP submitted deployment data, consumer crowdsourced data through speed tests and surveys, commercially available pricing and parcel data that helps us know what the cost of things are and where they are. And equally important, the NBAM brings that information together in an actionable way. For example, state and federal partners, they can bring if they have a grant, they can bring that planned funding service area. You may have heard of PFSA, and they can bring that eligibility information in it. And then you kind of get your own slice of the NBAM where if you're reviewing applications, you can bring in an application map and overlay it over your planned area and start to see and help you make decisions, which we find very helpful. So to provide a sense of the scale of what we built here, starting with that pilot with the 7.5 million and the 8 states, we've grown to 388 data services and layers across 43 different data sources, over 2.6 terabits of data. So we listened when we heard feedback from folks saying, get more than one layer of data, get multiple layers of data that then can be layered upon each other. And that's the secret sauce. So we've got data on the federal side. We've got FCC USAC data. So you think about the 477 deployment data. We've got RDOF grant eligibility information. We've got CAF data. We've got the hub data, all that historical stuff. USDA, we've got their Reconnect data on census. Hugely important and very rich data source. The American Community Survey, all that socioeconomic and demographic information that can really help you understand what's going on the ground. Treasury, we've got their opportunity zones. And on the commercial side, we're really have been intentional here. We have both MLab and Ookla speed test data. The MLab's interesting. That's more of a public source. We have that at the county and zip code level. The Ookla data, we actually are able to drill down to 500 and 100 square meter hex bins. So you can kind of dig into a census block and highlight the pockets that, and I'll show this in a later slide, but you can highlight the pockets where 25.3 isn't the reality for those users. We also have worked with a company called Broadband Now. They have pricing data. If you think about like moving to a new area, you can go find who the providers are in an area, and then they have all the plans. And so we've embedded that into the NBAM. And I'm thinking back to Catherine Keegan, what she was talking about on the digital inclusion side of things. It's not always an infrastructure challenge. It may be an affordability issue. And so having that pricing information is informative, and that's very new for us. We just integrated that in the last couple of months, and we're working with them to continue to get more data going forward. And then what else do we have? Oh, this is a really cool one too, parcel data. So we just bought nationwide parcel data, and it's so new that it's being delivered today. But parcel data, what's really important about that, it's got attributes like land use, utility hookups, address, structural information. And we built up this building footprint base layer in the map. So we start off with Microsoft's building footprint, which doesn't have any information. It just tells you there's a structure there. But then we've also brought in the homeland infrastructure data to bring some information about that, pharmacy data, library data, all this data that we're mashing together. And we bring this parcel data in there, we're going to have a real good base level layer to help you understand what's actually on the ground. And so what'll be interesting when, again, we start layering in the ACS data, the building footprint data, maybe you're looking at where you want to fund, and you can look at it and say, hey, that building just happens to be a low income community center. We know that because of the combination of the parcel and building footprint data and the ACS data, and versus this other area looks like that might be a highfalutin country club. They probably don't need any federal funding. And so those are the things that we're looking to be able to do. I'll go to the next slide here. So I mentioned this started off as a pilot. It's a multi-year program now. So the pilot was a success. We've continued to get funding. That 7.5 million, basically, it's been rolling. And so we're on our third tranche of funding, which is really encouraging. We don't have guaranteed funding. We got to prove ourselves every fiscal year. And so we continue to work hard to build out the capabilities and grow the user base and utilization of the tool. Right now, starting with the 8 partner states, we're up to 33 state partners. And Teresa knows firsthand how painful that joint program authority agreement. Basically, it's just a non-cash agreement that we have to enter into with states that allow us to share data and give them access to the NBAM. Elaine, who I believe is on the call also, it can be a bit of herding cats to get that through the process, but we've grown to 33 state partners, which is fantastic. We've got more in the pipeline. Our goal is to get to the whole country by sometime soon. And then we have 4 federal partners, and that's very informative also. USDA is one of our partners. They leverage the NBAM for their Reconnect program. It's a one-stop shop where their service area validation process, they're able to go in and evaluate applications and make decisions based on all the data that's in the NBAM and the capabilities. The Bureau of Indian Affairs recently joined us, which is timely because NTIA, in addition to the 4 federal partners, I would argue that NTIA is our own partner now because we're standing up 3 new grant programs, one on the kind of rural state, one with the minority serving institutions, and one on tribal. And so the fact that BIA is in the NBAM is complementary there. We also work with EDA, and we work with ARC, the Appalachia Regional Commission. And so all those folks. Now, later on, I'll show you some of the data we have on the federal side and how that's used. Let's see here, make sure I didn't miss anything. So I think one thing that's really important to highlight, so the FCC, I mentioned that the FCC and NTIA are kind of both in this space, but we have different purposes. The FCC is a regulator. Their map's designed to showcase broadband deployment data at the census block level, collected from ISPs via the Form 477 process. And they make it publicly available, which is great. Full stop. NBAM is designed to bring that data and the other federal, state, and commercially available data sets that we have. I mentioned that 2.6 terabits of data together for the comparison and analysis to support decision-making, better informed decision-making. So think of it more like a working platform to help you do your job versus the FCC is, through their role as a regulator, is able to, the NTIA can't go demand anything from ISPs. And so we leverage the ISP data that's from the 477 process, and we bring all that other data together. And you may have seen, again, that we got the 477 process, but the FCC has been mandated to update that. They're going to go more granular with the new Data Act. The good news is we view these efforts as complementary. And so as the FCC gets more granular, NBAM gets more granular. We will adapt and integrate the new, more granular information. We'll update our filters. We'll update all of our dashboards to take advantage of that new data. So it's a win-win. So here's a little sneak peek into the platform. And so one of the things, GIS can be a challenging space. So we wanted to create capabilities for both the experienced and the less experienced user. And so we've created a series of applications that basically kind of a curated experience to help you navigate all that data. That was important to us, but it was also important. We know that some states have their own GIS shops and they don't really need our help. Whatever we bought for NTIA, we bought for everybody, all of our partners. So all the access that we as NTIA have, all the licenses, everything. If I have it, you have it. And so folks can go out and create their own maps if they want to. I know, for example, out in your neck of the woods, like Utah, they have their own very robust GIS shop, and they can go out and do their own stuff, which is kind of cool. We also wanted to not just fish for people, but teach them how to fish, and so create a bunch of online documentation that helps you navigate how to get around the NBAM and how to use it. So that's all online with these cool story maps, which are basically almost like living PowerPoints that you can just kind of go through, and it's pretty cool tool there. And then we created our own training videos, and we also have a monthly webinar that we productize where we bring together all the stakeholders and kind of walk them through a topic, and then that's available for viewing later on. So we really wanted to help folks basically navigate by themselves. We're here to help and stuff like that, but we want to empower our user base to go off and use the NBAMs to support their programs. So this is our brand new sneak peek into our brand new application. And we've been very intentional about the user experience, and that may not always seem to be the case in some of our earlier iterations because it was a bit clunky. I'll admit it was not the easiest tool to navigate when we first launched. But as we have brought more GIS skill sets in-house and our vendors, we continue to evolve. And I think this latest application that we built is our most user-friendly and our most powerful. We're able to get more information. For example, in our prior iterations, we only basically had a comparison at the maximum speeds. Now we're able with the pop-ups to compare. Actually, I'll get to that one in a second. This is more about our filtering and the ability to filter by either the Form 477 FCC data or speed test data or pricing data. So just more capabilities to slice and dice the data, and then also get into the service provider visibility drill down there, which we think is very helpful. If we look at our pop-ups, we have a lot more information at our disposal now, so we can compare both the min and the max and the median. We can also look at quality information like latency and jitter. So very informative here that we find is very informative for the conversation. And then we created our very first publishable, what we call derivative works. And so the NBAM is a closed tool. It requires a user agreement. It requires a user account that's not available to the general public. But we recognize that while the data, Lindsay Hayes, my GIS expert, she called it the Hotel California. Data can check in, but it can never leave, which I get a big kick out of that. But we recognize that folks need derivative works. They need something that they can publish. And so this is our first publisher report. And so Teresa, I see your face there. You can actually go in here for every county in Colorado, and you can create this report. And you can PDF it, and you can take it with you. You can send it to anybody you want to. And so, because this aggregated information is available for analysis, which is really, really good. I only took a snapshot of the front page. It's a two-sided report, but it's just got a lot of great ACS data, the UCLA and 477 deployment data. We started this specifically for some technical assistance we were doing for historically Black colleges and universities, some of our TA work there. And then as we got those requirements and saw how that could inform stuff going on in those communities, we're like, this has broad appeal. And so we then productized it and made it available for all the users in the NBAM. So this is what I was talking about before when we had that drill down capability on UCLA speed test data. And this is the first time we have this ability to kind of peel back the onion and ask these questions, because we know that 25-3 conundrum. The FCC considers anybody in that census block is served, that whole census block is served, right? Or even a step farther, if they can be served in a reasonable, like 10 days or something crazy like that. And so that overstates broadband availability. And you get to some of these rural census blocks that could be hundreds of square miles, the whole census block is now not eligible for funding. And so here's an example where the backdrop is 25-3. It's the 477 data saying that census block is 25-3. All of these little colored hex bins are areas where the speed test data suggests that's not the case. And so there is no silver bullet data set. So but it does ask the question and empowers you as the policymaker to go back and say, maybe I should challenge the eligibility criteria here for this program, because we can see here that we don't have 25-3 in all areas. And so those folks may deserve to be eligible for funding that they're currently blocked out of. And so that's really, really important for us. And then here's just some navigation. We're always keeping the user experience in mind. And so we want cool tools to help folks browse for data that's online in the tool, or even add data. And so you can go out to Esri's library and bring curated data in, which is really helpful. And I'll kind of highlight these real quick here. So I mentioned our federal partners, and so folks use the NBAM for grant reviews. And so as new states are standing up grant programs, there's already a model in the NBAM that you can go through and have your eligibility information and bring in applications. We're going through that right now with our 3 new programs. The rules are being written and finalized right now, and once those are published, we're going to work with our internal grants teams to get the eligibility information, bring it into the NBAM, and then work with them to create tools and capabilities that allow our own grant team to go through and evaluate applications and make decisions. We're doing that with USDA, EDA we coordinate with. ARC is going to be using it for their power grants. That window is opening up soon. And so it gets very interesting. And we look at some of the other data that we have. And with these federal layers, so what happens with the NBAM is that a state comes in. So Colorado came into the NBAM. Colorado controls their data. And so Colorado, if you choose to, you can share your data with other states, but the default is it's protected for you. And that's because some states actually have some proprietary data. Missouri, for example, has some network information in there that's not publicly available. And so it defaults to off, but if they chose to, they could share it with other states. The federal and nationwide level layers are available to all of our users regardless. And in fact, some users come into the program without any data. Maybe they just are standing up their broadband program and they don't have any data yet. They're not locked out from all the benefits of the NBAM. They can still come in and take advantage. And so from BIA, we've got application data for Indian grants. Census, I mentioned that ACS data, hugely valuable data set. Education, we're bringing in information from there. Homeland Security, so I mentioned that Highfield data set, a lot of really good infrastructure information there. DOI, we've got infrastructure information from them. Treasury, we got the opportunity zones. You're familiar with that. Those are the basically tax incentive programs that spark investment. And then looking here, EDA, they use for broadband investments. We've got a ton of FCC data. USDA, really proud of that relationship with USDA. We've actually grown. Just recently, we entered into an amendment with them. They're going to grow beyond Reconnect, and they're adding in 2 more programs that they want to standardize and have a review process to leverage the NBAM for other programs also. So very encouraging, just as like for federal coordination and collaboration. I think it's a good news story. And then the national layers here, these commercially available layers, I mentioned the UPLA data and the fact that we have that 500 and 100 square meter hex bins that we can drill down. The MLab, we have speed test data. We're bringing in, so MLab just published a new API last month that we're in the process of bringing in. So we're going to have a lot more information along the lines that we have for UPLA, where we mentioned we have median, min and max and stuff like that. We're going to have that same complementary information at the MLab data at a higher level of aggregation. MLab is not census block. It's actually county and zip code, where UPLA is census and below. So kind of complementary. Broadband now, we got that consumer pricing information that's been very interesting. And then White Star, we just bought that, and that's in the process of being integrated. And that brings me to the end of my slides. So I'll open it up to any questions.
Thanks, Tim.
Except for Teresa. Any questions?
Oh, except for Teresa, you said? Yeah. So thanks, Tim, for the presentation. Any board members have any questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Antonio. Hi, Tim. Great presentation. It's the second time I've seen NBAM. How close are we to getting specific address location data, like an actual physical address?
That's a great question. Part of that challenge is that data is hard to get. If you think about census and U.S. Post Office, by law, they can't share it. Ironically, I'm in conversations right now with the White House to see about things that we can do to push that along. I'm not too optimistic, but I'm also working with some commercial vendors and folks. And even if you look at that with the parcel data, we're kind of cobbling it together, and so it's a work in progress. It's only as important as the ability to identify, like if somebody's getting mail, then more than likely they need broadband, right? And so if we can do some interesting things, we're actually in conversations with Microsoft also, and I'm kind of all over the place with the answer because it is so interrelated. But like Microsoft has, anybody who has a Microsoft computer in the middle of the night, it connects, right? And it does a system update, and they capture information about that. Could we, through a combination of in a secure environment, through IP address and maybe some physical address information, help better identify where broadband is and isn't? Those are conversations we're having. The answer is hard. So I don't have access to nationwide address level data. I continue to look at it. Similarly, like we wanted to go out and buy broadband infrastructure data. Wouldn't it be great to have insight into where all the, not just the last mile fiber, where all that middle mile fiber is? Nobody wanted to sell it to me because they would cannibalize their business. So when the reality hits the aspirations is where the challenges sometimes come in. Hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? If not, I think we have some comments and questions. I think you kind of answered this already, Tim, but I'll ask it anyways. Is the Ookla data available yet to get to a little bit more granular view of speeds? I guess that gets back to Antonio's question about getting address specific, but is there any more granularity to that data?
So we were intentional. We take data as is with one exception. We don't take PII or BII. We don't want it. We don't need it. So getting to the Ookla data, we don't go any lower than 100 square meter hex bins because of our collaboration with Ookla itself. They don't, and even if you looked at one of the pop-ups and you saw the number of tests and stuff like that, if there's only 2 tests in an area, it gets thrown out because you can actually drill down to find out who the tester was. And so that could be a violation of PII. And so we're kind of handcuffed in that regard. So we don't go lower than 100 square meters on purpose, but that's still pretty darn granular and gets a lot of information.
The concern from markup in Larimer County was that many addresses without service are lumped into blocks that say they have good broadband. So I guess if you're getting that close, I guess the data would be a little bit better, right?
That's the hope at that census block level where 25.3 basically blankets the census block and says it's binary, yes or no. Either everybody's eligible or nobody's eligible. That was that one slide example with the Ookla data where we showed where the actual user experience didn't match 25.3. And so that we would hope that would arm the policymakers either at the state or federal level to challenge whatever grant was looking in that area to say, hey, we should take a rethink here. We also look, we just did a map actually for a recent press conference with the press secretary Zaki and our Secretary of Commerce, Raimondo, that showed the 25.3 map, but then in red, all the areas based either on the speed test data or the ACS survey data that didn't have the requisite speeds. And there's a lot of red. very, very disappointing. And so those are the types of things that we're looking to uncover.
Okay. I think Teresa, you wanted to ask a question?
Oh, there's a
okay
question from Brian Jones really quickly.
Oh,
yeah,
I don't. Go ahead, Sarah. I'm sorry. I just don't see it. So sorry.
No problem. Is there any quality assurance applied to information provided by carriers, or is it taken at face value?
So the FCC, I'll default to the FCC's position on that they have some QA and stuff like that, but there is no data validation or verification like there was under the SBI program. So the data is taken at face value. They may do some like statistical stuff where they can go through a big picture and see some things, but there is no data validation on that, which is a challenge.
Okay, so now Teresa, I guess you have a question.
Thanks, Bob. And hey, my highfalutin friend. I love that term. You knew I had to teach you about that one, Tim. So, Tim, I want to first start out, thank you. You guys have done a heavy lift on this with a very, a small team. We've participated in this. The Colorado Broadband Office has participated in NBAM as quickly as we could get into it. And we really appreciate all the work your team does, especially this new public component, this information that we can share. Because we all are very sensitive that this entire endeavor could be quashed very quickly if sensitive data was getting released. So thank you for that, because we get so many questions at a state level. Obviously, we have a state middle mile program for mile broadband funding program. And so, you know, having tools like the NBAM are critical to our ability to identify where broadband is and isn't. Can you talk a little bit, I'm going to leverage off of that last question. Can you talk a little bit about how you all compare what you see when you see like the 477 data and then you compare it to the Ookla data, right? What, I know you guys aren't, you don't make decisions for people, but we hear from the industry all the time that, you know, you can't trust speed test data. But can you speak a little to what you're seeing nationally in comparing though that 477 self-reported market availability data with what, you know, you see in, for example, the Ookla data that's, you know, crowdsourced speed test data?
That goes to our strategy. And first of all, thanks for the kudos. We got a really good team we put together here, so really proud of them. It goes to it's very intentional about our strategy to find more and more data that helps inform the answer. And so when we think about the Ookla data is fantastic, but it's not the silver bullet. It helps you peel back the onion a little bit more. But it may be that it's an infrastructure question, or maybe an affordability question, that the tests are if a test isn't there, it doesn't mark the absence of infrastructure. It may be that the area is priced out of the market. So it's just one point. That's why we're looking at things like the Microsoft data. We could talk with Netflix and start getting these other pieces that then can be complementary and either reinforce what we're seeing, or we go where the data tells us. We don't go with a preconceived answer and then have the data validate that. We go where the data tells us. And so bringing more information in that can act as proxies that substantiate that. The ACS data, not just with the socioeconomic, but there's survey data in there, which is very informative. We've had states that have done surveys. For example, Maine has gone house to house and done surveys. Broadband Now, in addition to their pricing data, they've done a survey study that they've actually gone through and boots on the ground and are validating FCC data. We're talking about them about bringing that in. And so your point is great as far as we do our best to stay neutral, even to the point that we don't define what broadband is. We have a filter, and we have like a slider, because some programs may still be funding 10-1. I can put my own personal hat on and say that's crazy, but we're not defining what broadband is. But ARC, for example, they want 100. Like they're about economic development, and so we create tools that enable whomever the funder is to use the NBAM to support the program that they are building. And so you can move the slider to 100 if you're ARC, and then see what the impact is there, because to them 25.3 is not even broadband, and so they would argue, yes, I can fund that area because it's not 100. And then you get to the whole asymmetrical versus symmetrical and all that stuff, and how that plays in. So kind of a long-winded way to say we're always on the search for more data. We don't want a singular data source to be decisional. We want multiple data sources to help us better inform that decision and give the confidence, and then give you the tools with these derivative works that you can. I joke that you can't make $1 million decisions. Say, trust me, the NBAM said it's cool. It's like, no, it's not the magic 8 ball. We need to have validation and some support that helps explain why these decisions were made. And that's what we're evolving to with our BI strategy and bringing in the dashboards. We actually, with Colorado, you guys, another good example. We created a dashboard working with you guys that then we kind of put into our, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, like our little test area, our little lab, and other folks started seeing it. And they're like, hey, I like that. Can I get one? Can I get one? So now we're going to make that a nationwide dashboard that everybody can use. And so those things kind of happening organically like that are helpful, because if it's useful for Colorado, my guess is it's going to be useful for other states and vice versa.
Yeah, thank you,
Hope that-
Tim. It was one of those things that developed as a conversation because we knew our legislators would like to have publicly facing data that had, some granularity to it. So that, again, that's a big thank you. One geek question, Tim. You knew you couldn't get out of this without one. Because we have stakeholders on this call that that participate in, middle mile programs as well as last mile programs, I have to ask this question, because I can't remember, is there a layer within NBAM that has, an inventory of physical fiber routes across the country and specifically in our state? Is there that type of granularity on available fiber towers, all the, broadband infrastructure? Is that a layer that's in the NBAM today?
Unfortunately, no. That goes back to the broadband infrastructure I brought up. We actually did a full acquisition effort, put it out on the street, and none of the major players responded. So nobody would sell to us because they were worried about either the NDAs they had with the providers to get that data or cannibalizing their business with others. And so we're going to continue to try to get it. We do actually buy some of those front-end subscriptions to help inform like our own technical assistance, but that's not data that we can integrate into the NBAM and leverage and provide. Because again, whatever we buy for us, we buy for everybody. And those major players wouldn't play ball with us, unfortunately.
That's what I thought I heard. Just wanted to see if you'd figured out another way to skin that cat. So thanks, Tim.
You bet.
All right, thank you, Tim. Thank you, Teresa. Any other questions from board members? Seeing none, thank you very much, Tim, for the presentation. Very informative, and appreciate your time today.
Great. Appreciate it, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you. And next up, we have the Colorado Broadband Office's mapping. I think the CBO is going to do the next presentation. I don't know who from CBO will be there, or OIT.
Megan.
Megan. Okay, Megan, it's all you.
I think Tim's still sharing his screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, Megan took it over. Okay.
Okay, I found the unmute button. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Megan Gernert with the Colorado Broadband Office. So since you just heard all about the NBAM, we wanted to complement that with a presentation on Colorado broadband mapping so that you can see how these efforts interact and support each other. We'll start with the NBAM since that's fresh in everyone's minds. So what I'm going to try to demonstrate is how Colorado can use the NBAM. As Tim mentioned, some states don't have broadband mapping programs. Our state does. We have a fairly established broadband mapping program, some great GIS capabilities. So you might be wondering, do we need this? But as you just saw from Tim, this is a really great tool. The NTIA has put a lot of effort into understanding states' needs, and they've built this platform for us, and it's incredibly useful. There's essentially, as a state with a broadband mapping program, what we get out of it is the fact that the NTIA has curated this vast library of broadband related data sets. Many of these data sets are publicly available, but by having the NTIA do the work, that means that we don't have to do the work putting these into usable formats. So for example, the FCC 477 data is an Excel spreadsheet. So I could go download that, process it, spend my time doing that just to get it into a usable format every 6 months. Or I can log into the NBAM and click and it's right there for me. So that's a really great tool to have for us so that we don't have to spend our time, you know, putting all those data sets together just so we can do some statistical summaries and that kind of thing. The third-party data that Tim talked about is amazing. Having access to that UCLA and MLAB speed test data is great. Being able to drill down, we can compare that UCLA data to broadband fund applications. We can really drill down and see those speed tests. And then the last thing, which Tim also talked about, I'm trying not to be too repetitive, but this is a really cool tool, so it's worth the time to spend on it. We can upload our own data and we can keep that private. We could share it with other states. We can share it with federal agencies. So we can upload, again, broadband fund application areas, areas that Colorado has funded. We can upload our own coverage data to compare with the FCC 477 data to see what the differences are. So there's a lot of opportunity in there to really have all these data sets come together and be able to compare them. And then the other thing that they have is the summary and statistical information, which is just really great to have those kind of snapshots to be able to share that information with our stakeholders. One thing I'll also say about the data sets that the N-band is pulling together, there's a lot of data in there that we didn't know we needed. So it's really a learning process. Other states are asking for things, we are asking for things, and the N-band pulls all that together and curates that experience. So I might not know that I needed something, but Utah did it. So we think, oh, that's really relevant and we should start using that data source. So I'll go through a few examples. Just a quick view into what the NBAM looks like. This is the pilot application dashboard that Tim mentioned. That this came out of a question that I think Teresa asked in one of the meetings, and they sat down and created this dashboard for us. It essentially compares FCC data with UCLA data and takes the median speeds for each county. So I'm picking on Custer County in all my examples today, but you can see the speed, according to the FCC, the median speed is 15 down, 3 up. And according to UCLA, the median is 6 down, 2 up. So the next example, this is just kind of a deeper dive into one of the examples that Tim showed. For each census tract, county, state, you can get this information. But you see over here on the left, there's the UCLA maximum speed, FCC maximum speed, Broadband Now cost information. And then there's this table that has a comparison of a few of those data points. So that's really useful to be able to look at the state and compare counties, compare census tracts. And then the next example, which you saw from Tim also, this Broadband USA Community Report is just like the most useful thing for me, because people are always asking, just for these data points, oh, do you know how many, you know, what's the population of Custer County? What's the average income? So those data points all in one easy to export spreadsheet or dashboard is just really handy. So having access to that is great. They're also interactive. So you can see here, there's if you hover over the report, there's a little explore more buttons where you can like dig a little bit deeper into that data. And then the last thing I'll say about the NBAM is to reiterate that this is not a publicly accessible tool. The CBO has signed an agreement with the NTIA to have access to the NBAM. For now, the CBO is the only state agency with access to it. And we can handle requests from other agencies, from our various partners in local governments, and we're happy to handle those requests. As we move down the line, we can work with the NTIA on that relationship, and if we can bring on more partners into that agreement. Okay, so switching gears, talk a little bit about what's happening at the FCC. There's a lot happening at the FCC. The Broadband Data Act was passed in March of last year, and that directs the FCC to initiate a more accurate broadband data collection. The Consolidated Appropriations Act provided funding for this data collection in December. And since then, we have a third report and order establishing the data collection. In February, they established the Broadband Data Task Force, which is meant to coordinate the broadband mapping and data collection efforts at the FCC. In March, they released an RFI for the Broadband Serviceable Location Fabric, and they started asking customers or consumers for feedback about broadband experiences. So essentially, they're moving really fast. We're hoping that this process will be months, not years. So we'll be keeping tabs on what they're working on as much as we can. They're calling this new program the Broadband Data Collection, BDC program. And essentially the reporting for fixed service will be service area polygons or lists of locations. They'll be implementing the Broadband Serviceable Location Fabric, which is basically a nationwide database of locations that could or should be serviced by broadband. The website is listed there. We'll share out these slides after the meeting, so you have those links. But yeah, if you want to dig deeper, there's all the proceedings and press releases you could ever want at that link, and all the updates and news will be there as well. In reaction to these changes, OIT is adjusting our data collection guidelines to mirror the FCC as much as possible. We think they're headed in the right direction, so that's why we're making that adjustment on our end too. But we still need to have current and accurate data. So we are continuing our biannual data collection so that we have that data to support state strategy and funding decisions and everything. And we'll continue to adjust as the FCC process takes shape. So now I'm going to hand it over to a couple folks from our GIS team to talk about Colorado's process. And I think I'm handing it over to Christy first.
Hey, Megan, sorry to interject really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
So just to reiterate again, the NBAM is a tool that the Colorado Broadband Office has access to, as Megan said. And if you would like to have access to that or get some sort of report, you can contact us. You can contact us through the CBO website. you can also contact us through the email address, or you can contact Megan to work with her to set up some time.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, that's good to reiterate. I think a lot of people are itching for access to that tool. Okay, so I will hand it over to Christy.
Thank you, Megan.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, here I am. Hi, everyone. My name is Christy Ganser, and I work with the State of Colorado's Office of Information Technology with the Geographic Information Systems team. The GIS team, we work closely with the Colorado Broadband Office to collect and process data for the update and maintenance of the Colorado Broadband Map. Our team reaches out to internet service providers to collect broadband coverage data for Colorado. After receiving data from providers, we aggregate it into a single data set for the use in the Colorado Broadband Map. OIT's GIS team, in close collaboration with the CBO, also provides broadband data analysis for state agencies and decision makers. Next slide, please, Megan. Thank you. Our data collection efforts for the Colorado Broadband Map occur biannually, with our outreach beginning every January and July, and then data is published each April and October. At the beginning of each data cycle, our team is responsible for reaching out to a designated point of contact with broadband service providers across the state with a request for their most updated broadband coverage data. And feel free to email us at oit_broadband@state.co.us if you need to update your point of contact. Once providers submit data, we process each provider's submission and then aggregate it into a single data set. We process wireline data to be aggregated into Public Lands Survey System, PLSS quarter sections. And we aggregate processed provider submitted wireless data by speed. Next slide. Thank you. Our data granularity requirements are clearly communicated to broadband providers with each data request. Our data request asks after serviceable locations, which are the areas that the provider either currently serves or has infrastructure in place to begin service upon request. We use this data to build our serviceable location fabric. In the way of wireline data submission formats, we accept and prefer address points or latitude, longitude coordinates. My colleague Alex will further explain why we prefer address level data with the next slide here. We will also accept a model of the serviceable area for wireline submissions. And for wireless data submissions, we will accept a propagated coverage model or tower location and antenna data. And our team has a program that we use to process this type of tower data. From here, I'll pass it on to my colleague, Alex Gleason, who will further explain our data submission formatting preferences and why data granularity is so crucial for our work.
All right, thank you, Christy. So this slide serves to further explain the importance of granularity in our mapping of broadband serviceable locations that Christy touched on last slide. Specifically, this example depicts address locations receiving wireline connections. So here we have a comparison of how aggregating broadband serviceable locations to census blocks and PLSS quarter sections produce different landscapes of serviceable locations. In the first image on the left, we see quarter sections highlighted where they contain address being served a broadband connection. Each square or quarter section in the grid seen here represents a 40-acre tract of land. And the image in the center is using the same address points, but aggregated into census blocks. This is currently available at the federal level via FCC Form 477, as touched on earlier by Tim and Megan. We can see that where there is an address being served broadband internet, that the entire census block then is used to represent a broadband serviceable area. And so, that lack of granularity, would hinder our ability here at the state level to really identify those unserved areas. And in the image on the right, we see how those two types of serviceable location definitions, census blocks versus quarter sections, differ when combined. the yellow/orange squares representing the preferred aggregation versus the purple/pink squares representing the census block method. One is obviously more granular and therefore more useful than the other. However, as Tim and Megan mentioned earlier, the FCC is working toward transitioning their reporting to a more granular method here in the future. So, to sum it up, we want to be as granular as possible when creating a broadband serviceable location fabric so as not to overstate the landscape of broadband connectivity and to make sure our stakeholders can get funding for broadband projects to where it is needed most. Next slide, please, Megan. Just a little on how we use the data that we process here. One, to update the publicly available map. Feel free to check it out if you aren't already familiar. Again, these links and these slides will be shared, so you'll be able to follow those links. Two, our data analysis is used by state agencies and other stakeholders at the local level, such as regional councils of government, tribal nations, counties, and municipalities. Thirdly, one of our biggest stakeholders / partners, the Colorado Broadband Deployment Board within DORA, the Department of Regulatory Affairs. They operate the Broadband Fund, which holds 2 grant cycles throughout the course of each year, where internet service providers can apply for grants, and the Deployment Board uses the data we collect and analyze to help identify unserved areas and areas of need as they're going through their application process. I believe I will be passing it back to Megan just to close out our presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Christy and Alex. So yeah, just a last slide is a plug for our speed test. You've heard a lot about speed tests today, and I'll just point out that the difference between that mass market speed test data that we've been talking about and our CBO hosted speed test is that we have a survey that goes along with it. So in addition to getting your download and upload and latency, we also get information about what you're paying for, and how does the speed you're getting relate to what you're paying for, and what are you paying for it. So that's really important information for us to collect. So take the speed test and share it with your friends. So I think that's all we have, and I think we will I'll turn it over to Bob to take questions.
All right, thank you. Do you have any board members have any questions for Megan or Alex? Seeing none, Sarah, do we have any questions in the chat?
Yes, we do. So this first question is for Megan. Based on the best data, is there a rough estimate of what percentage of our Colorado residents truly have broadband 25 down, 3 up today?
Let's see. Am I still off mute? Yeah, okay. I think by our calculations, we are at about, I forget what this non-rural number is. I think it's 97% for the for the statewide number. We also calculate the number of rural households, and that number is about 90%. With Colorado having most of its population centered around the Denver metro area, that 10% of the population covers, every nook and cranny of remote and rural Colorado. And then there's those few folks in the exurbs and suburbs that are in pockets that don't have service. So yeah, the short answer is 90%.
Okay, great. I am putting in the statistics that we have from our metric into the chat as well so that everyone can see it. This next question is for Christy and Alex. When calculating tower height and antenna data, do you account for terrain?
I think I can answer that. So yeah, the software we use to generate these propagation models does in fact take in account terrain. So yes, the answer is yes.
Great. Let's see. Looks like we have. Okay. I think
Is that it?
in terms of questions, yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you very much, Megan, Alex, for the presentation and getting that all out. I know this will be all posted up here after the meeting, so you can always go to the website for the Broadband Advisory Board and get a hold of these presentations. All right. Well, I think that concludes, right, Sarah? We don't have anything else. One thing I do want to remind folks, we did change the time of this advisory board meeting to 11 a.m., not 9 a.m. Same bat channel, just different time. So we are pushing it back 2 hours. So we will see you all next month at 11 a.m. All right. Thank you all. Great job today. Enjoyed all the presentations. Hope everyone has a safe day. Stay warm, and we will see you next month. Thank you.